Okay, so on to topic 3.4. You should see this very simplistic diagram. We've seen this in the past when we were dealing with ecology. This is an energy pyramid. We're going to be talking about cellular energy, but I think it's helpful to talk about energy as a whole. Again, before we get there, we know as far as, let's not think about those chemoautotrophs down at the hydrothermal vents that can act independently from the sun as far as energy is concerned. Let's just consider sunlight energy for now, right? In this model, we have energy, right, coming from the sun into this bottom level of the pyramid. And at each level, we have energy being passed up, about 10% of it. And we have about 90% of it, the bulk of it, right, at each level, being lost as heat. Right. This is kind of the basics of energy and how it works. We need a constant supply of it. Remember that energy can be neither created nor destroyed. And at each transfer of energy, there's never 100% efficiency. Right. You're always going to lose something. In our case, quite a bit, typically. So one thing I want to talk about very quickly before we get too in depth in energy is that I want you to remind you about matter and energy and the difference. Matter, as far as what is concerned on this planet, is a cycle, right? In general. Do we lose some atmosphere to space? Yes, of course. We lose actually quite a bit of atmosphere to space, but in the grand scheme of things, energy is in essence a cycle. CO2 in the air is pulled into our plants through photosynthesis, is turned into sugars, which are eaten, and this is kind of cycled back out as plants respire and animals respire, and we put more CO2 back into the atmosphere. Right. Again, this is where major problems are happening because we're having increased emissions, right, from not just factories and things like that, but cars, all sorts of stuff. So we have a lot of CO2 leaving or entering our atmosphere. Also, we have a reduction in the amount of trees. So there's less things pulling it out. So we're ending up with a ton more CO2 in our atmosphere, which is increasing this kind of greenhouse effect, which we'll see on the right up here. It's important to know that energy is not a cycle. Energy is not a cycle. Energy flows through an ecosystem. In other words, we need a constant supply of solar energy in order to, maintain the homeostasis of our bodies, in order for our plant cells and bacterial cells and all life on Earth to maintain at all. We need a constant supply of energy because it flows through the Earth. This energy does not get recycled back. It gets absorbed and then radiated as heat. Eventually, every photon of energy that comes from the sun is going to be radiated back out into space at some level. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Remember, matter, cycle, energy is not a cycle. Energy flows through our ecosystem. And of course, a lot of it gets radiated out as heat immediately, but some of it gets absorbed by plants, animals, things like that. Okay, so let's talk about energy kind of at a more local level here. You'll see this picture over here. These look like Swiss rolls, but these are actually logs made of cellulose, which, as you'll know, is a long chain of carbohydrates, which contain a lot of energy. Right? This is what kind of wood is generally made of. So a bunch of cellulose. Now, when you take this cellulose, these long chains of carbohydrates, and you light them on fire, what you get is kind of the typical campfire like you might expect. And it releases CO2, water, and heat as part of this chemical reaction. This is a very brute force way to get energy, right? But it works, right? You can put a pot on top of this and cook some food, right? If you wanted to, you can use that energy for that. But this is a very crude way to get energy, right? This doesn't really work in a cell. So we have some very complex processes that we're going to talk about more in depth. And this is kind of I chose this on purpose because it's a very complex diagram of cellular respiration. I chose it because it's complex, and it shows you that you have all these different little processes where you're taking a little bit of energy out of each little step in this process, right? Fermentation, oxygen's present, you get a lot of energy out of here. But you're taking in these small steps, right? These small steps, you're kind of taking little pieces of energy out of this carbon, because if we were to set, obviously, the cells in our body, on fire, right? This is my crude drawing of the cell here, but you set this on fire, sure, you'll get energy out of that reaction, right? But is it going to be energy that your body can use? No, of course not. It's just going to destroy everything in sight, and destroy all the cell and all processes that may or may not be going on inside of it. So we need to release this energy slowly from our glucose. You'll notice, though, at the end of this process, I'll circle it up here, you have CO2, H2O, and heat. In this process as well, you have CO2, H2O, and also heat. Coming out of this process, your body radiates heat, right? Of course, the input for this is glucose, right? This is our input over here. It was cellulose. But the process is similar in the sense that you're taking something and you're burning that for energy, right? The difference here is that we do this in a very systematic process in which we have many, many enzymes involved and coenzymes and things like that, which are going to help us break stuff down piece by piece, break these carbon-to-carbon bonds, and release that energy for us in a very slow, controlled manner that doesn't cause our cells to combust. So that's the basics of energy. We're going to talk in depth about cellular respiration, photosynthesis, and these processes. But do understand that this process it has a lot of steps. We're not going to learn each individual step, but there are a lot of kind of little small releases of energy in our bodies, which is much different than the kind of brute force method of getting energy out of sugars. Okay, that's it for this video. Thank you.